Hi there, and welcome to another review. Today's film is going to be The Long Walk, and I was not prepared to watch this film. This film is very dark, very gritty, and unlike those who have already seen this film or were already privy to it based on its earlier novel, I gotta say that this was a good movie, but a difficult one to watch. The film essentially follows teenagers who volunteer to be a part of a competition, and it seems easy, right? Like walking. However, the caveat is that you have to walk at a pace of 3 miles per hour, and there's only one winner, meaning that everyone else has to die. So as you're watching this film and you're rooting for certain characters, you're also inadvertently rooting for other characters to die because, like I said, there can only be one winner. So yeah, with the main premise out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about some of the positives. The first positive right out of the gate that I have to mention is the characters. The characters, especially the main protagonists, were shown very early on, and we're meant to follow these characters, and we're shown little bits and glimpses of their motivations as we progress throughout the story, which is great because it keeps us invested in these characters, keeps us either voting for or against. And as it pertains to Ray and Pete, primarily, those two, you see their relationship grow, this brotherhood that develops eventually with other characters. And whenever they're on screen, you just can't help but continue to watch. And you want these characters to live, you want to see what happens. And like I said, I was not privy to the early novel, so I had no idea how the story was going to end, what was going to happen. And all I knew was that I was voting for the Four Musketeers, as they call themselves in the movie, to live, to see the end. But also dealing with the reality that that couldn't be the case. There could only be one winner. This movie definitely does not stray away from its graphic scenes. Typically in movies like this, when someone dies, you'll hear a gunshot in the background or you'll kind of see it off screen. This movie definitely puts you front and center to some of the hardships that these people go through. And the deaths are very gruesome. And just some of what they go through, someone breaks an ankle and is having to keep up with the 3 miles per hour pace. And eventually they don't make it. And other situations where people just had enough, they give up, they just sit down and they also die. So this movie had so many hard scenes to watch, so many emotional scenes. And what kept me intrigued and kept me wanting to watch was the fact that you have these great characters, these great dynamics, especially between Pete and Ray, and seeing them just uplifting one another. Specifically, Pete. Pete is definitely the glue and the heart of this movie. He's very upbeat, seeing the positive things despite all the horrible things that they've witnessed. And he's really the one that connects everyone. So as the movie progresses, he's one of those vital characters that you don't want to see die. And this movie does just such a superb job of just character development. And the ending, I thought the ending was very in par with what the movie was portraying. It's very grim, dark, and it's definitely subverted my expectations because, like I said earlier, I was not privy to the book and I don't exactly know how the book ends. But in terms of this movie, I'll let you know how it ends. So if you haven't seen the movie, stop right now and, come back to this point once you have seen the movie. So essentially, Ray dies. We start the film with Ray, with his mom dropping him off to this competition. And from there, I was like, okay, so he's probably going to be the one to live, considering the movie starts off with him. But no, he does not make it. He makes it to the final two. So it's just Ray and Pete, the two people that have kind of bonded throughout this whole event. And eventually, they're the last two remaining. And Ray eventually sacrifices himself, and Pete ultimately wins. But it's not done in a way that's very hopeful. You see, Pete, he gets his one wish, and he gets the money rewarded to him. And before the money is awarded to him, he asks for one of the guns. One of the soldiers has a gun, and he asks for that to be his wish. And he uses that gun to kill the general that was essentially pushing everyone through this competition. So it's very grim. I mean, I assume that, he probably isn't going to make it. He probably is going to die. He just shot the general and he's surrounded by military people. So he's probably not going to make it. He's definitely not going to see any of that money. And for the one being so hopeful and the emotional glue to this movie to be the only one to live was definitely heartbreaking to see on screen. And even though you're rooting for all these people, I really thought he was he wasn't going to make it. But like I said, this movie definitely subverts your expectation. And I'm really curious to know how the ending differs from the book, if it followed the book, if it didn't. If any of you have read the book and watched the film adaptation, please let me know in the comments below what you thought of this ending. And yeah, in terms of the mix or the things, the negatives, I would have to say the world building. And maybe they do more of that in the book and kind of explain what's exactly happening in the US, how the US has turned so drastically, and how this dystopian future came to be. I found myself wanting to know more about the world in which these 18-year-old boys, young men, were participating in this event, and just wanting to know where the US was, what was happening, what was the other perspectives, how did other people view this game? Because this movie is definitely focused on, well, the long walk. It doesn't venture far from the title, from its main premise, and so we don't really get to see these other perspectives, which I really was interested in learning more. So maybe I will have to go back and read the book. But yeah, in the end, like I said, this movie is definitely a hard movie to watch. It's gut wrenching, it's emotional at times, and you really find yourself rooting for these characters to make it out. And for me, this film lands at a definitive 4 out of 5 stars. It's a movie that I'm not sure if I could recommend just because of how grim and dark and emotional it is. But if you know that going in and you have that expectation set that it's going to be a grim movie, then by all means, go ahead and watch this film. But if you're not into movies like this, if you're not into movies that aren't very uplifting, upbeat, and positive, then I wouldn't watch this movie. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Film Sense with Brian.